Hi everybody, it's me, Jessica, back for a weekly update on what's going on in the vermicomposting bins in the kitchen. So today I thought what we would do is go ahead and peek in and see how they're making progress on the 3 pounds of organic material that we put into the bins. I put that organic material in on Sunday and it is now Wednesday morning, so we're going to see how our red worms are doing processing all of that material. You'll note I have 3 bins. I put about 1/4 of the material in this bottom bin and 3/4 of that it was 3.15 pounds into this bin. And this is just the bin that we're using for paper cover. So first let's look in here in the top bin. All this is the shredded paper that I'm using to sort of cover the bins in case we would have any fly activity or anything like that. It's damp, but it's not too wet. Everything's fine. It's doing just what it's supposed to do. And unlike last week, I don't see any worms up in here really working anything. So I suspect they're down where the food is. We're going to pause this now and just look into, we'll start at the very bottom bin. We're going to start down here and see how they're doing, then work our way up the bins. Okay? So hang on, I'll be right back. Okay, we're back and we're looking at the bottom bin. One of the things that's very interesting to me is that when I do remove the bins, either to feed or to take a look at the process to see how it's going, through the holes, because these have grid-like bottoms, some of the worms hang down almost looking like spaghetti strands, and you can tell they're migrating up and down through the bins. So you want to be very careful. I use an extra square bin to hold the bin that I'm not working with, just so that your worms don't get crushed on the floor or something like that. So let's take a look at the bottom bin. So there was probably close to 3/4 pound of food put in on Sunday, and I really don't see any organic material left. Not very much anyway. What do we got here? Oh, a little tiny bit of tomato and stuff with worms on it. I haven't put any citrus in the bin. This really looks quite good. It's damp, but it smells earthy. It doesn't smell bad. It doesn't smell like decay. Oh, look at them. Look at the guys go. And I know you may be interested in why I wear medical gloves while I'm doing this. It's not because I mind touching the earthworms or anything like that. I just happen to have stitches in my ring finger on this hand, so I'm trying to keep that as clean as possible. Looks like they've really done a good job in here in terms of turning over the organic material. There's not much left, if any. I mean, you saw that little tiny piece of tomato, but that's really all I can find. What I'm mostly looking at here is worm castings and worms. And I seem to have worms in various stages. They're all really quite active. Some are chubby and big, and some are short and fat. See this little guy? Kind of short and fat. And not dead, which I like. I haven't seen any worm castings, but then again, I'm not always sure what I'm looking for. Because it's a little bit dark. Here's a little dude who is thin and pretty active, looking to escape. So the worm bin itself seems fine. I don't see any indications of worms that are not alive. I mean, worms obviously go through their own life cycle, but this looks active and healthy to me, and there's no smell. There's nothing here that would indicate to me that I'm having some kind of worm die-off. It does feel damp, earthy, feels a bit rich, and no, even he's moving. So everybody's alive in here, and they're doing fine. So this bin I'm going to leave now. I won't be feeding out of this bin anymore. It'll just be for composting. And at the rate they've been going through bedding and food in this particular bin, I would suspect a month, and it should be completely turned over. But I will check it weekly because I don't want to lose my worms. I want to make sure that I separate out the compost and continue the feeding process for them. So I'm going to pause the video again, and we will look at the second bin, or the top feeder bin, and see how they're doing. Okay, this is our top feeder bin. We put in close to 3 pounds of food into it this week already. And to be honest, I'm not seeing very much by way of food. You may recall I showed you last time that I had herbs in there that the worms didn't seem to like. Here is the rosemary that is completely stripped bare. All the rosemary leaves are gone. This was a basil, and the basil leaves have been stripped out. They're gone. This feels really quite damp, but not too wet. I've turned it with my hands a little bit. Oh, look, there's a basil that they need to eat still, which is good. But they're active. They seem quite active, very healthy. There's no odor to this bin whatsoever, except not musty. It smells a little bit like spring dirt. That's about it. Here's part of my experiment. This is the avocado pit experiment. I have one going in the window. I'd forgotten I'd put this in there. I have one going in the window, and this I have buried down in this feeder bin, and we're going to see if through the action of the worms we can get a faster sprout on that avocado pit. So I'm going to bury it back down, replace the paper. Now, I was a little concerned when I first opened this up that it might be too wet. And I know some people think, well, you know, they're worms, they need it to be wet. But if you think about it, after a rain or after a spring melt, when you see all of the worms come up and they're on the sidewalk and on the streets and the roads, it's because even in their ground environment, it can become too wet and they can, for all intents and purposes, drown. Worms have a slime layer and they have gas exchange through their skin. It's not like they have a lung set system the way that we do. So I didn't want my bin to be too wet, and this paper looks really quite damp to me. Consequently, I'm going to hold my kitchen scraps this week until I have a chance to work through this a bit further, and that way they can dry it. I've also turned it with my hand to make sure that plenty of oxygen and air is getting in there and that there's nothing too compacted. They're earthworms, so they're supposed to work through compacted soil, and I get that. But these are artificial block boxes and they're plastic, so there's nowhere really for the worms to go. And as a consequence, if you see them coming up the sides or trying to make a break through the cracks, then you know your system's either too wet or too dry. And in this case, my concern was that it might be too wet, but I really don't think it is based on smell and the activity of the worms. I think what I can do is just hold off on feeding them any more kitchen scraps this week. So the worms are looking good. They're doing their job. There are a lot of them, and they are highly active. I'll show them to you here. Here they are. You can come through and see they're just moving around right here, sort of wriggling away from the light, which is what you would expect them to do, making lovely amounts of vermicompost. So we're going to leave them alone now and not mess with them for about a week. And that's all we're going to do with the red worms this week. The next video I'll be making really will spotlight the European night crawlers who should arrive and should be ready to go into their next home, which is my cloth-covered homemade bins. So I'll see you next time.